When's the last time you spent a full day resting and relaxing? Oh man, how much better would you feel if you could? Welcome to Journey at Home. So glad you're joining us. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, take a second right now, do that for me so you don't miss any of this helpful content, because we want to make it simple for you to follow Jesus and live a better life. Now, back to this question. When's the last time you spent a full day resting and relaxing? A day where you didn't catch up on chores around the house or projects that needed completing? A day when you didn't run your kids around activities or hustle to get some paper written? When's the last time you spent a full day with the people you love doing things that refuel you? Now, let me ask you a tougher question. Do you have one day where you rest and relax weekly and consistently? A day where you spend unhurried time with God, with yourself, with those you love, refueling for the week ahead? I know, just the thought of that sounds like a fantasy, doesn't it? I mean, who has time for that? Because you got work to do, you got papers to write, you've got presentations to prepare and projects to complete and meals to cook and kids' activities to attend and doctors to see and lawns to mow and rooms to clean and laundry to do and money to make, and we could go on and on. But when God was giving the Israelite people 10 basic commandments for a better life, number 4 on the list was this: remember the Sabbath day, which means a day of rest, by keeping it holy. Holy just means set apart and different from the other 6 days. And then he said, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, all that's in them, but he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the 7th day and he made it holy. So God took a day of rest to show us that we needed one. But that sounds so antiquated and outdated now, right? Nobody's got time to spend one day every week just doing the things that refuel and re-energize them. Nobody's got the time to slow down and reconnect with God and spend time with those we love. We live in a modern world that's fast-paced. It's full of demands. I mean, who could do this anymore? I don't know, but maybe we should figure it out. A study in 2022 found that 75% of people have experienced burnout. The last few years, they have been particularly exhausting for those of you in public serving professions like teachers or doctors and nurses, law enforcement officers, first responders. A 2022 Ohio State study found that 66% of working parents in the U.S. suffer from what they call parental burnout. Parents feel that. The endless rat race has us exhausted. It's just hurting our families in the end. I mean, listen to this. 71% of teenagers have experienced burnout. Now let that one sink in. Burnout is common because our pace of life is unsustainable. There is something about our current pace of life that, if we were being honest, is just unhealthy. We weren't designed to live this way. But who's going to do something about it? Now, if you're just joining us, this is the 4th episode of our series, How Are You Doing Really? And the subtitle is so important: Finding Hope for Mental Health, because hope is the goal of this series. In spite of the fact that we like to tell people we're fine, the latest research indicates we're probably not telling the truth. 1 in 5 adults live with a mental health challenge. Among young adults, that number jumps to 1 in 3. I mean, we're just not fine. And not talking about it's clearly not working, especially in the church. The church should be the safest place on the planet to open up. So I'll repeat what I've said every single episode. You can have a growing faith in Jesus and have mental health challenges. Your mental health struggles are not a sign that you don't trust God enough. It's not a sign you're not spiritual enough. It's not a sin to struggle with mental distress. So if you're facing some of these challenges, listen, go see a doctor. Start visiting a counselor. Tell a friend you serve with or you're in group with here at church. Check out our resources that we have in our app, or go to journeycalway.com/resources, because we care about you too much to let you not do anything about this. So today, our focus is going to be on burnout. And let me just start with the definition. Burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion that's brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. Now, here's what's interesting. Researchers are discovering it's not just hard work that creates burnout. It is meaningless work. It's not too many tasks. It's purposeless tasks. It's pointless tasks. Burnout occurs when a person doesn't feel like they have any say in how they do things, and that the things that they do don't make a difference. It happens when a person is overwhelmed in a situation. They feel like they have no support. Often burnout's the result of abandoning some healthy boundaries. Either you're violating your own boundaries or you're in a setting where you have no control over your boundaries. But if you don't say no to the right things, you'll never be able to say yes to the best things. And that prolonged and repeated stress just drains and exhausts us mentally, emotionally, and physically. And you probably won't be surprised to know that burnout often leads to anxiety and depression. So what's the solution? What's the answer? Well, to find it, all we need to do is look back to an ancient Israeli piece of history. In 864 BC, one of Israel's greatest prophets, his name was Elijah, was playing a prominent role in the national and the cultural news of the day. The king of Israel at the time was Ahab, and he was not a king who honored God at all. Maybe you've heard of his wife Jezebel. Well, when Elijah's about 30 years old, God tells him to go warn Ahab that because Ahab has forsaken God and Ahab's choosing to worship the Canaanite god Baal, he says, tell him a drought's coming on the land for the next few years. Well, Elijah does, and then he immediately has to flee into hiding for his life, where he spends the next 3 years largely isolated and alone. So in 867 BC, all this comes to a climax as Elijah confronts the Baal worship in the land, and God does a big miracle to show he's the one true God. It's this incredible moment for Elijah. The problem is it ticks Jezebel off. She is so angry that she swears she's going to kill Elijah no matter what it takes. Now think about this. God's just done something extraordinary for Elijah. So you would expect him not to be fazed by what Jezebel thinks. Who cares about her threats? But this is the 7th stressful event Elijah has experienced in the last 3 years. And it's like it's the last straw. As you're about to see, the heroes of the scriptures are real people. So, in 1 Kings 19, here's how we're told Elijah responded. It says Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. Because exhaustion and fatigue can make cowards of us all, can it? And then the story says when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. Now, the last thing you need to do when you're feeling burnout is isolate yourself. But it is what we're all most tempted to do. You were not created to do life alone. You need community. So do I. This is why showing up at a church in person every week, while participating in a small group, while being a part of a serving team, it's why it can make such a difference. Because you need to be in the presence of others. You got to have those connections. If COVID taught us anything, it taught us that. God never intended you to be the only person who takes care of you. But if you notice in the story, Elijah leaves the one guy who's been with him. He just leaves him behind, and he disconnects from everybody. And that's when Elijah hits rock bottom. The story tells us he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than any of my ancestors. Now, aren't you glad God knows which prayers not to answer? But this is how Elijah feels at the moment. He's got nothing left in the tank. He thought things were going to get easier once God did the miracle, only to see Jezebel threaten his life, and now he's not sure anything he's endured has made a difference. He's kind of feeling like it was all waste, and he's just shot. His tank's empty. He's hit burnout. Some of you, you know what that feels like, don't you? You have worked so hard, but it feels like it didn't even matter. Well, that's where Elijah is. The writer tells us that Elijah lay down under the bush, and he fell asleep. And you get the implication he fell asleep just hoping he'd never wake up. Maybe God would answer that prayer of his. But God was not finished with Elijah. The writer says all at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." And Elijah looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals, and there's a jar of water. So he ate and he drank. He lay down again. Then the writer says the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey's too much for you." So he got up and he ate and he drank. Now I love this. God started to restore Elijah by helping him just do the basics. Get some rest and eat some food. He started by meeting Elijah's physical needs because you can't divorce your physical health from your mental health. They are connected, aren't they? Mental health challenges often happen when you ask your body to sustain a pace it wasn't created to handle. So if you're feeling burnout, you got to start by taking care of yourself physically. You slow down, you rest. The only cure for an unsustainable pace is a slower one. Now, I know you don't like to hear that, but it is the truth, isn't it? You have to take control of your calendar. You got to create margin in your life. You got to say no to some things so you can be healthier for the people who matter most to you. So here's what I want to challenge you to do. Would you block off a day on your calendar where you just slow down, reconnect with God, maybe go outside and get some sunshine, turn off your phone, take a nap, enjoy a meal with some friends, refuel your soul. A day where you don't do work. You don't run like crazy from one place to another. You plan a day that will re-energize you and reset your pace because your body wasn't designed to thrive at an unsustainable pace. In the scriptures, this day is called the Sabbath, and Jesus says he created it for you, for your good, for your health. So, would you do this countercultural thing and practice one day of rest every week? Maybe for you it's Sunday. As you can imagine, I can't do mine on Sunday, so mine's often a Friday or a Saturday. But we all need one. And I'll tell you from experience, it's going to require some serious work on your part to protect that day because everything and everybody's going to be pulling at you. But let me remind you, if you feel you can't step away from one day of work, that you can't step away from one day of activity, then it's a sign you are trying to do God's job. You're trying to control outcomes. And that is going to contribute to your burnout. One of the biggest benefits of a weekly day of rest is it reminds you that the world keeps spinning even when you're resting. It's a reminder, God's bigger, you're smaller. I know the majority of us are living at an unsustainable pace, and I am personally concerned about what that's going to do to you and what's going to do to the relationships you have with those you love if you don't change. Remember, the only cure for an unsustainable pace is a slower one. So, you willing to fight for it? Parents, listen, would you stop unintentionally training your kids to live at an unsustainable pace? I mean, you don't realize you're doing it, but this schedule that you have created and lived by, it's setting them up to be unhealthy. God has something better for us, but we have to trust Him enough to slow down and rest. So, this week, pick a day and give it a try. Because nobody has to live life or follow Jesus exhausted. He promised, remember this, Jesus said His way of life is easy and His burden is light when we follow Him.